Strikes aren't uncommon. Maybe employees are striking for better wages or benefits. Or, like in the COVID world we live in now, maybe they're striking for simple things like masks and protective equipment to keep them safe. Although you may not have personally ever been in a strike, it's not something that would take many people by surprise if they were to hear about it happening. But what if I told you a strike was taking place in a video game? And no, I'm not talking about boycotting the video game sales or having people stop playing the video game, but what if a strike actually took place within the game itself? Well, that's exactly what's happening right now in the world of Foxhole. I was originally going to make a video about this and how it's affecting the game after the current war ended to kind of discuss how it may or may not have affected the war as a whole. But with websites like Kotaku, PC Games, and Eurogamer making articles on the strike, even if they are pretty short articles, I felt as if it might be a good idea to elaborate a little bit more on what exactly is happening in Foxhole and what is the quote-unquote LOGI strike, and also why it's happening. First off, if you're unfamiliar with what Foxhole is, it's a top-down, massive, multiplayer online, persistent war game. Two made-up factions wage a fictional war over the land of Siva, and everything in this game is made by the players themselves. Every bullet, every bandage, every vehicle, everything you get your hands on or get shot by was first raw materials that players refined and manufactured in order to send out to the front lines in hopes to kill the enemy. I have a video on my first time playing Foxhole called The First Day of War 83, which I'll link in the top right of your screen here if you do want to see more, since this truly is an incredible gaming experience unlike anything I've ever seen before. In a massive multiplayer war game, there are going to be many different roles needed in order for players to be successful. Just like in other MMOs where you'll need DPS players, tanks, and healers to kill bosses and clear dungeons, in Foxhole you need frontline combat players, medics, engineers, and logistics. And as the old saying goes, logistics wins wars. Foxhole Logistics could have its very own 1-hour tutorial video just to understand the basics. So I'm going to give you guys the quick and dirty overview so you have an idea of what we're talking about when we mean Foxhole Logistics. In order to make anything in Foxhole, you first need to collect material, either salvage or components. Salvage can be turned into basically anything, allowing you to create rifles, bandages, explosives, and basic building materials called BMATs, while components are for the expensive stuff, like artillery pieces and tanks. Take a hammer, get to swinging, stuff your material in the inventory, and off to the factory you go to produce whatever you want. Once it's made, put it in your truck and deliver it to the front wherever it's needed. It's an incredibly straightforward idea, and the draw to this game is definitely the sandbox do whatever you want game mechanics. But although anybody can do anything that they want in game, the reality of the situation is logistics has to happen. If nobody collects salvage, also called scrooping, which as a fun aside is actually called scrooping because back in the day the game's chat filter actually censored out the word crap in scrapping, so the community found a way around it by using O's instead of A's, and therefore scrooping was born. But if nobody scroops, then there's no material to manufacture weapons and ammo. And if there's no weapons and ammo, you can't fight a war, and, well, then you lose the war. And not only that, what if you have all of these weapons and ammo, but you don't have someone to transport the weapons and ammo? What begins to happen is that in the sandbox of do whatever you want world, players begin to feel forced to do things in-game that they really don't want to do, but have to do. You get people who are stuck driving a truck or swinging a hammer for hours on end in a war game. Like there's an actual war going on with artillery and gas grenades and tanks and trenches with bayonet charges, and you're stuck mining because nobody will do it. Of course, there are people who want to play these roles, but at the end of the day, logistics can only get so interesting. There's only so much you can do to make logistics fun and rewarding, or at the very least, user-friendly, or not as mind-numbingly repetitive. And this is where the LOGI strike comes into play. Back in October of 2021, a Discord was formed to unite all of the logistics players in-game, which is actually a pretty big deal since this would bring together players from both factions, which historically really don't like each other. But under the banner of logistics, word began to spread that there should be a union or a movement or an anarchist rebellion in the world of Foxhole to try and get the word out that the logistics side of the game needs some love. Although the word strike was definitely thrown around, at this point striking wasn't really on the cards. Over the next couple months, and with plenty of memes to go around, the Logistics Organization for General Improvements, or LOGI, was formed in order to have a unified voice that would eventually draft an open letter to the Foxhole devs, stating what the players felt were the main issues with the logistics gameplay loop, as well as offering some suggestions that would make their time in-game better. And they gave the devs a bit of an ultimatum: respond in some fashion to our letter by January 10th, 2022, or we're going to do something. I think we're going to do something, right? Okay, we'll do something. The campaign for LOGI was on, and a 2-hour logistics roundtable was actually broadcast by the Press Corps, a player-run in-game news agency that runs stories on the wars. A website was made to gather feedback, and the open letter itself was drafted and translated into 14 different languages, including Chinese, Russian, and even Welsh. Nearly 2,000 players signed this open letter, which I'll link in the description below, and has 11 key issues that LOGI players feel the need to be fixed in order to improve the logistics experience as a whole. Although these are the main ones, there's a lot more. Like, there's a lot of problems these guys have been talking about. There's also a Google Doc with 32 issues and possible solutions, but as someone who is a member of this very Discord and has talked with quite a few people about the issues they're facing, I can confidently tell you that this is a much shorter version of the original complaint log. Trust me, this they've cut it down quite a bit. I can't get up the thing! As the deadline grew closer with no response from the devs, LOGI began organizing and polling its members to come up with a course of action of what they should do if the January 10th deadline came and went. And with the new war being announced to start on January 11th, it was the perfect time to conduct an actual in-game strike that would have a real effect on the war itself. But what would that strike even look like? Would they simply stop playing? Would they actively sabotage logistics areas to prevent others from playing? After polling their members, the overwhelming majority stated that anything that would ruin other people's games would not be appropriate. No griefing, no friendly sabotage, no breaking the terms of service. But what they did agree on was to perform both a strike and what has been called a reverse strike. For the strike, instead of stopping playing altogether, the vast majority of LOGI players agreed to simply play frontline combat roles, essentially draining their team supply by moving their priorities to combat instead of production. After all, this is a game. There's nothing forcing someone to only play logistics, right? And if there's no problem with logistics and it's a fun gameplay loop, then obviously other people can quickly learn and have fun performing the logistics abilities too, right? Additionally, a reverse strike was also voted on, which called for LOGI players to begin partisan operations. And partisan operations is essentially going to the enemy's backline and sabotaging enemy logistics, which is, once again, a perfectly acceptable way to play the game. With the LOGI members getting ready to go into the front line and also the enemy's back line, the January 10th deadline passed without any official response to the open letter. And officially, LOGI went on strike as a brand new war started the next day. If you've never played Foxhole, every war is brand new, a clean slate with specific starting conditions that the devs create for that specific war, and selective industry management to make different towns and regions more or less important as a way to make the games less repetitive. Now, I'm not saying that the devs have been paying attention to the LOGI strike or not, but in what I think is quite possibly the biggest troll move I've ever seen, War 87 actually started with fewer refineries and fewer factories, and all of the frontline storage depots and seaports, which are usually stocked with basic supplies to get the war going, were empty. It was almost as if the devs said, okay, you want to strike? Well, have fun with less everything. And within the first hour of war, some areas were barely able to fight with more than just their pistol. Add in the usual Logi players who were shooting bad guys as well instead of scrooping, and everyone began to get into panic mode because it was nearly impossible to get anything made and shipped to the front. This also resulted in a hilarious rumor that Logi was actually a PSYOPs campaign created by the other faction in order to trick people into stopping doing logistics for their faction while they still help their own team. And reports of colonials turning on colonials and wardens turning on wardens, arguing and yelling and even threatening players to stop sabotaging their own team and go back and scroop for the war effort was endless for the next few hours. The first day of War 87 was definitely stressful, but as we are now looking at about 10 days in, has this strike actually had any lasting effect on the war itself? I will say that many of those who have decided to strike are actually striking, and there's a noticeable increase of players who would normally be playing logistics roles up in the front lines. Random bases and towns are definitely a little less stocked than usual, but Foxhole is a game that typically has large clans or regiments operate in an area for defense and attack operations. I've noticed that these larger regiments aren't really affected by the strike since they typically produce whatever they need as well as provide plenty of material to the public area they're operating in. But smaller regiments and towns or bases that might not be seen as a priority or within the operating area of a big regiment are definitely feeling the pain. Additionally, there's also been a huge uptick in partisan activity thanks to the reverse strike. One of our regiment's main Logi officers has completely swapped to daily operations behind enemy lines destroying equipment. There's also been the rise of what has been dubbed the sniper barge, where ex-Logi players will sit and wait offshore in boats for unsuspecting logistics vehicles to drive over a bridge, only to then open fire with the high-powered sniper rifles and destroy the vehicles, which will also destroy all of the material that they were making, and probably spent hours doing so. In an ironic twist of fate, Logi players are actually making other Logi players rage quit the game just by playing the game, straining logistics even further than before. This could possibly be the first large-scale strike ever to occur in a video game instead of the real world. And at the rate it's going, I would actually be very surprised to see it end without some acknowledgement by the devs. Once again, I don't necessarily think the devs owe anybody anything, since they have stated that there are big things coming for logistics in the future. And although it might be really easy to hotfix a bug or an exploit, redesigning a feature in the game that has to find the proper balance between resource scarcity, material availability, and fun is actually going to be pretty difficult to get right. It might very well be that some things Logi is requesting to be fixed can't because it would have incredibly negative effects on the frontline gameplay loop, or make it just simply too easy to get equipment. But that doesn't mean logistics players should feel so burnt out from the Logi gameplay loop that the only reason that they keep doing it is because they feel forced to. That's probably something that should be fixed. I'll have a follow-up video if the devs do respond or if Logi takes any other action in the future, as well as a wrap-up on the strike as a whole if and when it ends. But what do you guys think? Are you a logistics player that's striking? Or maybe you're someone who's never even heard of Foxhole before and the nature of an in-game strike seemed just weird enough to get you interested? Let me know in the comments below, since this is definitely not something I thought I would ever be making a video on. If you did like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more, and if you would like to check out some Foxhole live, do join us for the live streams at twitch.tv/MoiDawg. But that's it for me. Until next time, peace.